Hello everyone, this is Pet Crochets. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're finally going to be doing the tutorial for this Lacey beach/summer cover-up dress. I absolutely love the way this dress came out. I crocheted this for a vacation I took recently. If you watched my previous tutorial on the crochet macrame cord beach bag, this is the dress I was wearing in that tutorial. For this dress, we're going to be creating a V-shaped, more of an open back style. And then for the sides of the dress, I had these two wooden rings that I bought along with that macrame cord for the bag. And I thought it'd be nice to kind of create a peekaboo style open section with the wooden rings. So we're going to be adding those details as well. Of course, this pattern is going to be adjustable and customizable. So if there are things that you don't like about the pattern, if you want to make it longer, if you don't want the back to be as open, or if you don't have those wooden ring details, you can absolutely change the pattern to your liking. And as always, this tutorial will be measurement based, so you can really make this dress to any size as long as you have your measurements, and we will be breaking it down step by step. Although this is a beachy/cover-up dress, I also wore this to dinner and was able to transition it into a dinner dress by wearing nude undergarments underneath. So I will say that you can wear this with a slip or some nude undergarments, or if you know how to sew, you can definitely sew in a liner, and I think it would be beautiful as a dress. I'm also thinking of making a longer version or a version with some long bell sleeves, so that might be coming in the near future as well. I feel like there's so much you can do with this dress, and it's perfect for summer and for a vacation. If you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to have another video coming very soon where I use the same Lacey pattern to create a pair of shorts and a matching top. So I'm excited to share that as well. Alright guys, let's get started with this tutorial. Here are the details of the yarn I'm going to be using. This yarn color is really beautiful. It's soft. You do want to keep in mind that this particular yarn with that lacy pattern will have some stretch to it. So if you're using a different yarn, you might want to create a swatch first, just so you have a better idea of how much stretch there's going to be. For this project, I'm grabbing my 4mm hook. Before we get started, here is a horrible diagram that I made and some of the measurements I took. So the first measurement is going to be for the top part of the dress. Basically, you're going to go from under your armpit to around the end of your clavicle or your shoulder bone area to the other side. For me, that was around 11 inches. I also took the measurement across my bust, or the highest point over my nipples, from the side of my breast to the other side of my breast. And if you don't want the dress to be open on the sides, I would take it the measurement more from under the armpit area or the side of your body to the other side of your body. I'm also getting my waist measurement, so from one side of my waist to the other side of my waist, and then my hip measurement. For this part, I did wrap the measuring tape around the widest part of my hips and just halved that number. Now let's take a look at these lace panels. So it's made with a combination of stitches, and it's basically going to be a repeat of 4 rows. We have a V-stitch row, a double crochet row, and 2 mesh rows. Each of these chunks of 4 rows is around 2 inches, and we're going to be doing our increases into the V-stitch rows only. And each increase is going to increase by ½ an inch. For the front panel, we're going to be increasing once at the beginning of this row and once at the end of the row, which will mean that we will be increasing by 1 inch, since 1 increase is ½ an inch. Each V-stitch increase will increase by 3 double crochet stitches in the following row. This will all make sense as we start working on our panels, but I thought I'd provide this information if you're making the dress purely based on measurements, just so you know how it's going to increase. And again, if you're going to be using a different hook or a different yarn, I would create a swatch panel with the increases just to see how much it will increase. Now that we know how much it's going to increase by and how many inches each set of the lace panel rows is going to be, you can kind of figure out how many increases you need to do and when you need to do them. So for my first measurement, I have 11 inches. I need to do 2 increases to get to my bust measurement, 1 increase to get to my waist, and then 3 increases to get to my hip measurement. And that kind of just helps me to figure out when I need to do the increases, when I should do a no increase row, and so on and so forth. Now for the back panel, we're going to be making 2 identical panels. For the top of this panel, I did half of the clavicle measurement, or half of that starting measurement we took for the front panel. This way we can do a gradual increase. We're going to only be increasing on one side, and it'll give you a nice open V-shaped back. If you don't want the back to be as open, you can start off with a bigger measurement for that top portion. Just remember you're doing another identical panel, so you want to make sure that you take that into consideration. We're only going to be increasing on one side for this panel. If you don't want it to be as low cut or as open, you can increase every row. I believe I only increased every other row, every other lace panel row, which is again 2 inches. Remember, it's 4 rows that make up that lace panel. So you can increase every lace panel to make it increase a little bit more to give you less of a scooped or open back. The goal for the back panel is that when we end the back panel, you want it to be half of your waist measurement, so that when you put the front panel and the 2 back panels together, it's going to fit around your waist, and then from there we'll work down to the bottom of the dress. Before we start making the front panel, I just want to show you how wide I personally made my front panel. So as you can see, it starts around the bottom of my armpits and goes to the end of my clavicle. And then I started off by making a rectangle with no increases, and then started increasing for my bust. However, if you have a bigger bust, I would start the increases sooner. So just take all of that into consideration. We're now going to get started, finally. We're going to chain a multiple of 3 plus 2. Again, this is going to be that beginning measurement from one side of your shoulder to the other side. For round 1, we're going to double crochet into the 5th stitch from the hook. You're now going to skip 2 stitches, and you're going to double crochet into the 3rd stitch. We are starting off with the V-stitch row. This is going to be row 1. Now chain 1, and we're going to do a V-stitch, so you're going to double crochet back into the same stitch. A V-stitch is a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all into the same stitch. Now you will repeat the pattern by skipping 2 stitches and V-stitching into the 3rd stitch. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all into the same stitch. You will repeat this all the way to the end. This will complete row 1. To start row 2, we're going to begin with a chain up of 3 and turn our work. And into this first chain 1 space, we're going to place 2 double crochets. That chain is going to count as a double crochet, so technically we have 3 double crochets into that chain space. Now you're going to find that next chain space in the next V-stitch, right there, and you're going to place 3 double crochets into that chain space. And this will be this row. This is the double crochet row. So you're placing 3 double crochets into every single chain space. And I'll show you what to do at the very end of this row so it is a cleaner edge. Just so you don't get confused, this is the V-stitch before the last V-stitch, and this is the final chain space all the way at the end of the row. We made it to the end. You're going to place your first 2 double crochets directly into that chain space, and then the final double crochet we're going to place into the top of the 3rd chain. This is our turning chain from the previous row, and placing the last double crochet in the top of that turning chain. And that will complete this row. This is row 2, the double crochet row. We're now chaining 1 and turning our work. And to begin the 3rd row, we're going to single crochet into the first 2 stitches. This will be the first mesh row. Now you will chain up 3, and you're going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet into the 3rd stitch. You're basically single crocheting into that middle double crochet stitch. Remember, we had 3 double crochet stitches. We're single crocheting into the middle one. Again, chain 3, skip 2 stitches and single crochet into the 3rd stitch or the top of that middle double crochet. And you're going to do this all the way down. The very last single crochet you're going to put into the top of the turning chain. So remember, in the beginning we had 2 single crochets, at the end you should have 2 single crochets. The last single crochet goes into the top of the turning chain. To start the 4th row, or the final row for our repeat, we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and single crochet into the first stitch. This is our 2nd mesh row. You're going to chain 3, and directly into that chain 3 space from the previous row, you're going to place a single crochet. And this will be the repeat, so chain 3, into that space, single crochet. And you're going to repeat this to the end. At the end of the row, I place my last single crochet into the top of the turning chain, so chain 3, and right into the top of that turning chain, you're going to place your final single crochet, like so, and that will complete the 4 row repeat. So each lace panel is going to have 4 of these rows. Now to begin the next row, or row 1 again, of the V-stitch row, you're going to chain up 4 and turn your work, and we're placing a double crochet right into that chain space from the previous row. That chain 4 counts as a double crochet and a chain 1, and that will be our first V-stitch. Now you're going to V-stitch directly into the next chain space. Remember, it's a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And you're going to place V-stitches into every single one of those chain 3 spaces from the previous row. And I'll show you what we're going to do at the end so it gives you a cleaner edge. We made it to the end. The final chain 3 space is right here, and we're going to place our first double crochet, chain 1, and then the last double crochet I'm placing into the second chain right there. This is just so that it gives it a nicer edge, and this will complete the row repeat. So from here you're going to repeat rows 2 to 4. Remember, each lace panel is the 4 rows. And you're going to repeat this until you're ready to do the increases for your bust. So this is what I have so far. If you remember back to my diagram, in order to reach the highest point of my breast or over my nipples, I needed to do 2 increases. So I'm going to be doing the 2 increase rows, and I'll show you how to do an increase. Remember, we're increasing into the V-stitch row. So if you're going to be doing an increase, stop at the last mesh row before you start the V-stitch row, because we're going to be starting our increases in the beginning and the end of that V-stitch row. To start the increases, I stopped at that final mesh row, and we're going to start our increases in row 1, or the V-stitch row. We're going to chain up 4 like we usually do, and that will count as a double crochet, chain 1, and we're going to double crochet into the first chain space. So here's our first V-stitch, as we normally would. Now instead of putting a V-stitch to the next chain space, we're actually going to do our increase by placing a V-stitch back into this very same chain space. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, again back into that chain space. Now we have 2 V-stitches into this first chain 3 space. Now you're going to just continue doing the V-stitches normally all the way down. If you want this to increase a little bit more rapidly, or you need more increases, you can increase into the other chain spaces by adding another V-stitch like we did in the beginning. I'm going to be increasing at the end of this row again by placing a V-stitch directly into that chain space, and then placing another V-stitch. And remember, that final double crochet we're placing into that second chain. So if you look here, we have 2 V-stitches in this final chain space, and we have 2 V-stitches in the front, or the beginning of this row. Each V-stitch is going to be 3 double crochets in the following row. So we're increasing by ½ an inch for each increase. Each row is going to increase by 1 inch since we're doing 2 increases. From here, you're going to continue the pattern as you normally would and add as many increases just into that V-stitch row until you reach your bust measurement. So for me, again, that was 2 increases. So that was 2 lace panels, and each lace panel I did an increase at the beginning and end of the row in the V-stitch row. Once you reach your bust measurement, then you're just going to add no increase rows and increase rows until you reach your waist length. For me, I only needed 1 more inch to reach my waist measurement. So I did a couple of no increase rows and then did 1 panel increase row to reach my waist area, and then kept going with no increase rows until I reached around my waist length. This is what my panel looks like so far. It's reached my waist length, and here's what it looks like measured up against my body. So as you can see, the bottom of the panel hits right around my waist before my body starts to increase for my hips. Everyone's going to have different measurements. That's why I gave you the breakdown of the different measurements and how it's going to increase and so on and so forth, so that you can accommodate and change the pattern so that it fits your body's measurements. For me, once it hits around waist length, then I need to start doing increases again for my hips. So now that this panel has reached that area, I'm going to start doing the increases again, and I needed to do 3 increases in order to reach the widest point in my hips. So for the next couple of rows, I added increase rows, so I did 3 lace panels, and each lace panel had an increase in order to increase the 3 inches that was needed to reach my hip width. This is what it looks like so far after I've added all of my increase rows. This now fits my widest point of my hips, and once it's reached this measurement, now you're just going to add no increase rows straight through until this reaches your desired length. We are now ready to start our back panel. Remember, we're making 2 identical panels. The top of this panel is going to be 1/4 of the starting chain of the front panel. So I'm going to fold my front panel in half just to show you. And this is one of the back panels. So when you line up the back panel with the front panel folded in half, this should be half of that. So basically 1/4. When you add the 2 back panels together, it'll be half the measurement of the front panel, or the top of the front panel. If you don't want the back to be so open, then you'll want to do a wider base. Just make sure that you don't go over 1/2 because you're making 2 panels. And you want to make sure that your starting chain is a multiple of 3 plus 2. Now we're only going to be increasing on one side, as you can see here, so it creates that V shape. Again, if you don't want it to be so open, I alternated rows for the increases. We'll be talking about this later on, but you can do an increase in every single row so it's not as open. So this is what the panel should look like lined up. I'm starting off with 1 lace panel, so this is 4 rows, and this is 1/4 the starting chain of my front panel. This will measure 1/4 of my front panel. Again, if you're doing something differently, you're going to have different measurements. I'm going to show you how I'm increasing just on one side only. So I'm starting off with the next row. Remember, we increase into the V-stitch row. This is the last mesh row. We're doing a chain up of 4. Here's my first V-stitch, and we're going to increase by placing another V-stitch directly into the same chain space. So those are my 2 V-stitches, and that will be my increase. And I'm not going to be increasing at the end of this row. We're only increasing on one side. From here, you're going to alternate between the increase and no increase lace panel rows. If you don't want the back to be so open, you can do an increase into every single lace panel row, and you're going to stop the increases when you reach your half of your waist measurement, because we're going to be making 2 of these panels. Once you reach that measurement, you can add no increase rows until this panel is long enough that it hits around your waist area, like we did for the front panel. From there, you're going to make an identical panel. So it might help to write down when you did the increases and how many lace panels or how many rows you did. You also want to make sure that you end on the double crochet rows, so it's easier when we attach these 2 panels together. So here are my 2 back panels. You can see that when we aligned the two ends of the panel together, it'll create a V shape. We're going to align this before we join the sides together, so make sure those two increasing ends are facing inwards and the non-increasing ends are facing outward. I'm placing my hook back where I left off, and I'm going to find the first stitch on the other side of the panel and join these two panels with a slip stitch by pulling the yarn all the way through. Now I'm going to go into the very next stitch and do another slip stitch. From here you're going to chain up one, cut the yarn and pull it through, and this will join the two panels together. I also recommend tying those two yarn ends. I didn't show it in the video, but tie those two yarn ends and then really weave those ends in so that it doesn't come apart. Now we're going to go into the corner, the outer corner stitch, and pull a slip knot through that corner stitch and chain up one. And remember, we left off on the double crochet row, so you're going to start off by continuing the pattern. The next pattern is going to be the first mesh row, so we start off with 2 single crochets, chain 3, and then find the middle stitch of the double crochet from the previous row, and you're basically just going to continue the pattern, and I'll show you how it's going to look like when we reach the middle. We just finished that last mesh. We're chaining up 3, skipping over the middle section here, finding the middle double crochet stitch on the following side, and just continuing the pattern. So because we're skipping over the middle section, that's why it's really important to really weave those ends in and make sure that it's tight and secure. Otherwise, you run the risk of it falling apart or coming undone. So from here, you're going to just look at your front panel and see where you did the increases for the front panel to accommodate for your hip width. If you have a bigger backside or you need the back panel to be a bit wider than the front panel, you're just going to do as many increases as necessary so that when you add the front and the back panel together, it will fit over the widest point of your hips and over your butt. For me personally, I didn't have to do that, so what I did was I just followed how many increases I did for the front panel and made sure I did the same thing on the other side. And when I reached the widest point of my hips, I just did the same amount of non-increased rows as the front panel. So basically, when I joined those two panels together, I went on to continue and mimic what I did for the front panel. So I just showed you guys the back panel and the front panel, and now we're going to clean up the edges for both of these panels. So I'm just going to start off with the back panel where I left off and put my hook back into the stitch that I just finished off. And we're basically going to do single crochets along the entire perimeter of this panel and then do the same thing for the front panel. That way it's easier from when we're seaming and it looks a little neater. So I'm putting my hook back in, chain 1, and I'm turning my work to the side. So as you can see, there's no clear stitches to go into for this rough side. You're just going to add single crochets as evenly as possible along the entire perimeter of this top. So here I am placing my single crochets, and I'm just going to continue this and keep going all the way down along the entire perimeter and come back around. I also placed 2 single crochets into the corners. That will count as the turning chain as well. When you reach back to the other side, chain 1, cut and pull the yarn through to secure, and this is what it should look like. The edges are nice and cleaned up. You're going to repeat the same exact steps for the front panels. So chain 1, turn your work to the side, and then place single crochets as evenly as possible across the entire perimeter of the front panel. Then you can place 2 single crochets into the corner stitches to act as the turning chain, and when you reach back to the other side, chain 1, cut, and pull the yarn through to secure. We're now going to get ready for seaming our panels. Before we do anything, we're going to align our panels. The right side is going to be facing inward, so for the front panel it's facing up, for the back panel it's facing down, wrong side up. We're going to start off by seaming the top of these 2 panels together. Place your hook into the corner stitch of the back panel and the front panel, and you're going to pull a slip knot through both of those stitches. Now you're going to chain 1, and then go down by placing your hook through both stitches on both panels and do a single crochet. You're going to just keep going down, making sure to go through both panels and placing a single crochet. At the end, you're going to chain 1, cut and pull the yarn through, and then repeat the same steps for the other side. So you're going to keep single crocheting to seam and do the other side as well. Now we have the top of the dress joined together, and we're going to go to the bottom of the dress and seam up to the point of our waist. You want to make sure that everything is nice and aligned. And for my dress, I had the open V section of the back hit around waist level. So I knew to seam up to this point, and that would be around my waist area. If you did this differently, you're just going to seam up to your desired area or your waist area. And to start seaming, we're placing our hook into the corner stitch through the front and the back panels, pulling a slip knot through, and then we're going to do a chain 1. And then once again, to seam, we're placing our hook through both stitches on both panels and doing a single crochet all the way down. Then you just repeat the same thing on the other side as well. We're now ready to add our wooden ring detail. If you did not want to add a wooden ring detail, you can do a variation, for example, putting a side tie, putting a ribbon. You could seam up this section completely. If you don't want to, just make sure you stop a few inches under the armpit, or you can add like a mesh row, however you want to do it. To add the ring, you're going to place your hook into the stitch where you want to start the ring and pull a slip knot through, and then slip stitch into the very next stitch. Now you're going to chain up 1, you're going to place your hook into the next stitch, and you're going to align your ring like so. You're going to put the yarn in front of the ring, pull the yarn from behind the ring and pull it through that stitch, and then do a single crochet. Here it is one more time. So you place your hook into the very next stitch. The ring is going to go in front of the hook, the yarn's on top of the ring, go behind the ring and pull the yarn through that stitch, and then finish off with a single crochet. I'm going to slow it down one more time so it's easier to see. We're placing our hook into the next stitch. The ring is going in front of the hook. The yarn's in front of the ring, and we're pulling the hook through the ring and grabbing the yarn. So we're pulling the yarn through the ring. See, I'm grabbing the yarn with my hook from behind the ring. I'm pulling the yarn through that stitch. We have 2 loops on our hook, and then we're going to finish the single crochet. So you're going to grab that yarn again. The yarn is in front of the ring. You're going to want to pull up a little bit and then grab the yarn and pull it through the 2 loops on your hook to finish the single crochet. So here's the first loop and pulling it through the second loop, and that will finish the single crochet, and I believe I did 4 stitches. So I'm going to do, that was 3 stitches, I'm going to do 1 more stitch. When you feel that it's secure enough, so I did 4 stitches, you're going to do a slip stitch in the next stitch. Chain 1, cut and pull the yarn through to secure, and now you want to align the other side and do it on the other side as well, making sure that you count the stitches so that it's even. Once you finish the other side, you're also going to do this again if you're adding another ring for the other side of the body. This step is optional, but I also added a peacoat detail along that open backside. I'm going to link a video on how I did the peacoat border for a different item, a different tutorial. I also added back straps on both sides of the back panel, about an inch below the seam. So you're just doing 2 long chains on either side so that you could tie the back together. Next, I'm just going to quickly show you guys how I added the shell border along the bottom of the dress. You're going to pull a slip knot through one of the stitches at the bottom, chain 1, and into that stitch we're placing a single crochet. Now you're going to skip any number of stitches. I did 2 stitches. And into the following stitch, you're going to place 5 double crochets. So you can skip 2, 3, 4 stitches. It'll change how spread out the shells are and how elongated they look, if that makes sense. I'll also link a video on how I did the shell border for the bottom of the rose halter dress. It's the same method. You're going to skip the same number of stitches, and instead of doing a shell into that following stitch, you're going to do a single crochet. And that's the pattern you keep repeating. So skip X amount of stitches, do the shell or the 5 double crochets, skip X amount of stitches, do a single crochet, and at the end just slip stitch into that very first single crochet you did. Okay you guys, and once you weave in all of those pesky ends, this is what the final product looks like. Let me know what you think of this beachy cover-up dress below. I really love this Lacey pattern so much that I actually made another pair of shorts and a top, a matching set that will be coming out very soon. I also added some wooden details to the back straps for a nice little contrast and texture detail. You can really play around with this pattern and make it your own. If you do decide to try this tutorial or this pattern out, let me know in the comment section below. And if you'd like to share photos, you can send them to me at Peppa Crochets on my Instagram. I really love seeing your guys' creations, and I love it when you share the photos and videos. It just makes me so happy, and I love getting to know you guys and the crochet community. So if you want to share any photos, or if you have also any comments, concerns, or difficulties, you can definitely leave me a comment or reach out to me on my Instagram. I also have a tutorial out already on this crochet macrame beach bag if you want to check that out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to have that matching set coming out next, so stay on the lookout for that. And as always, thank you so much for following me on my crochet journey, for leaving me wonderful comments and feedback, and for continuously supporting me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone!